Dijeron igualdad, pero esta vez me separaron. Dijeron mucho, pero no se olvidaron de callarse. Cuánto odio por mi piel sembraron. Dijeron historia y la tergiversaron. Dijeron guerra, muerte, odio y nos culparon. Siempre. Enfermedades, epidemias nos contagiaron. Exterminación de mi fauna complace a tus mercados. Dijeron riqueza y todos se lo robaron. Oro, platino, diamante, a la fuerza se lo llevaron. Y la actualidad es tan triste que todo aquello que dijeron es lo mismo que hoy se dice más. ¿Quién dice, quién explota, quién se beneficia? El asesino, el mismo que da las noticias. Hay una cuenta fácil que siempre me da las grandes riquezas, de dónde vienen y hacia dónde van.
Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao. Nati Dre es afroresistencia, cultura ancestral, afrodescendencia, solidaridad. Esa es la esencia, la diáspora africana eleva la conciencia, conciencia negra, universal, progresista y transcultural. Negros y mestizos revolucionando, pueblos caribeños y africanos en un solo bando. No más explotación, colonialismo interno, no más confusión, supremacía blanca en el Babilón. Soy rojo, negro y verde, afroliberación. Mientras más negro, más represión. Somos creadores, recupera tu visión. Mi misión es educar con amor, contra el silencio, vivo sin temor. Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
What's happening, good people? It's the Rise Up Morning Show. You know we do around here right about this time, broadcasting live and direct. You know what I mean? We're here from broadcasting from France and the U.S. You know what I mean? Here to give you that critical political action, pure satisfaction. You know what I mean? I am Kalanji Changa, riding shotgun with my co-host today. We got Isaac Jasper in the building, alongside Boona. You know what I'm saying? If y'all don't know Boona, y'all better get familiar. Boona is the general of all things African. He's the Hannibal of Rise Up Morning Show. He come through on his elephant and park right here every morning for y'all. So you better act like you know. Anyway, what's happening? How y'all doing out here?
It's all good. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. How's everybody? I've seen everybody held it down while Fernando and obviously me were absent. So I want to say thank you guys for that. Chairman O'Malley. That conversation was really, really dope. To see O'Malley on Black Power Media was something that was long overdue. And so I really do appreciate the work of my co-hosts that are here and you know what was accomplished. Ikemba, Natasha, Boona, Kalanji, you know, also Fernando, some, you know, and you know, there's a lot of back, you know, stuff you guys don't get to see, you know, in the makings of how we do this. And so I just want to respect that and whatnot. And so, yeah, I'm happy with the trajectory of the show, and you know, we're rising up, you know, we're living to the name, and so that's always something that, you know, you gotta highlight. So yeah, I'm happy to be back, y'all. That's just really what it is. Happy to be back.
we happy to see you back, brother. We thought you ran away from home and whatnot. You was gone for a little while. You know what I mean?
People have been asking us, but we didn't know what to say, right?
You said what now?
I said people have been asking us, where's Isaac? But you didn't know what to say.
Yeah, we was making up stuff. He's like, he's on vacation. He's on the moon. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, we're glad to have you back. Cause I'm
glad to be back. I'm glad to
make
be
up
back.
An elaborate story like some of these other platforms be doing. You know what I mean? But we kept it cool though, because that's how we do around here. shout out, we have new shows. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You know, yesterday, Public Enemy's Professor Griff launched his new show, ATM, Arm the Masses, right here on Black Power Media Reloaded. So make sure that you reload if you missed that particular episode. He'll be here every Wednesday, 12 noon EST, rocking his new show. If you know Professor Griff from Public Enemy, you know that he is no stranger to quote unquote controversy. He's not the type that holds his tongue, so he fits right into this whole Black Power Media platform. We also want to say there's a show coming up on Monday, Decolonizing Feminism, with Professor Dr. Joy James, Jaleesa Jackson, and Khadijah Haynes. They'll be rocking their show, like I said, on this Monday coming. So make sure that you tune in. And if you're unfamiliar, the Rise Up Morning Show broadcasts every Tuesday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. EST. So make sure y'all check in and get familiar. We have a heavy show today. Couple dope guests. And we want y'all to know we live up to international. We're not playing no games. We're not just saying because we have folks in France and the US that's international. We're dealing with Africans globally, and we're dealing with issues globally. So you know, we have a couple guests today, and I think that you know, I'm gonna have Buna go ahead and introduce our first guest today because we got a packed show today.
Yeah. Yeah, so our first guest, Ricardo Vaz, is a journalist, political analyst, and activist. He's also a grassroots organizer based in Caracas, Venezuela. Ricardo actually was born and grew up on the mother continent in Mozambique, which, as you know, is a country that gave birth or was home to some of the most important African revolutionaries of the 20th century, including Eduardo Chirambo Mondlane, who was born in Mozambique in 1920 and was assassinated in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, in 1969. He was one of the founding members of the Front for the Liberation of Mozambique, Frelimo. Another of those revolutionaries was Machel, who was born in Mozambique in 1933, who ultimately became the first president of independent Mozambique in 1975, and he died in a so-called plane crash 1986. It was actually an assassination. Another revolutionary that we wanted to mention is Ruth First, South African journalist, scholar, and political activist, member of the South African Communist Party and the ANC, born in Johannesburg in 1925, and was assassinated by a letter bomb, the same technique that was used to kill Mondlane. So she was assassinated in Maputo, which is the capital of Mozambique, at the University of Eduardo Mondlane in 1982. Just a quick background of the history of the country where our guest was born and grew up. So although Ricardo has a background in theoretical physics, he has gradually moved towards journalism and political analysis. In 2018, Ricardo joined Venezuela Analysis as a staff and editor. Venezuela Analysis is an independent online news outlet produced by journalists and researchers whose main objective is to, quote, counter the corporate media propaganda against the Bolivarian Revolution by giving voice to left-wing and grassroots organizations in Venezuela. So people can visit and donate to Venezuela Analysis. So their website is venezuelaanalysis.org. So Ricardo is also a member of Grassroots Collective, Tatui TV, and Utopics. So Ricardo, welcome to the Rise Up Morning Show, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here. Special thanks to Buna. We've been in touch for a while. He was actually in Caracas maybe a couple of months ago, but it was a busy time and we didn't really get a chance to meet, but we then stayed in touch, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Ricardo. Yeah, it was pity that we didn't meet in Caracas. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that I'll be back soon. I can't tell more because COINTELPRO COINTELPRO 2.0 is on our back, right? So
Ricardo,
Ricardo,
just run when you get there. When you find out he coming, make sure.
No,
I
no,
can't give too much information.
I even have a spare bedroom for him.
Oh, poor Ricardo. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So Ricardo, I've tried my best to give a proper introduction to our audience as you're coming in. But for those among our viewers who don't know you and your work, I was wondering if you could tell us more about yourself and the work you've been doing with Venezuela analysis, Tattoo TV, and Utopics.
Yeah, I think that was a great introduction. I really appreciate it. Just on Venezuela analysis, a quick disclaimer before I begin. Most of what I'll say is aligned with the editorial line of Venezuela analysis, but I'll also have some opinions that might not be shared by everyone. So just to have it out there. And yes, I'm most of all a journalist based in Caracas with this mission that we're going to get into in detail of providing a counterweight to the corporate media propaganda that's constantly demonizing Venezuela and is kind of endorsing a regime change operation that's 25 years and running with different stages and different efforts, but it's there and it's constant, and we'll get to discuss why. And apart from that, I mean, once you're here, as Buna can also testify, you cannot be indifferent to the kind of effervescent popular power that you find, and this has a lot to do with Chavez, but it also has to do with other historical precedents and also a historical trajectory of rebelliousness here in Venezuela. So over time, I've had the opportunity and the privilege to get involved with some of these collectives, helping them mostly in terms of communications and being useful in any way I can. Just a couple of words about the other two main organizations I work with. Tattoo TV is a community media outlet that used to be kind of a local community outlet in Mérida. Mérida is in the Venezuelan Andes, and now it's kind of migrated into a full digital platform. And if I had to summarize its mission, it's basically to stimulate debates within Chavismo. So Chavismo has always been, I mean, contrary, I'm getting ahead of myself, but contrary to the media description that this is kind of a monolithic follow the leader movement, this has been a very vibrant, very critical and self-critical movement. And so Tattoo aims to foster those kinds of debates within Chavismo. Where is the revolution going? What are the priorities? Are there differences between Chavez's policies and the present policies? How are they affected by stuff like sanctions that we're also going to discuss, these kinds of things. And finally, Utopics is a different kind of project. It's based in Venezuela, but not really Venezuelan. It's a group of artists that came together and then brought along some non-artists like myself with this overarching mission of putting art and graphical work at the service of popular struggles. And here I would summarize maybe two main avenues. One is, let's say, a dispute of history. So going back and rescuing, highlighting historical figures, historical processes that have either been ignored by the official historiography or misrepresented. And here, for example, we've written about Walter Rodney and how Europe underdeveloped Africa. We wrote about Black Power, people like Kwame Ture, Malcolm X, the Panthers, and so on. Also a lot about Palestine, historical figures like Gaston Canafani. We've taken that approach. We, apart from the digital realm, we also had a chance to do a real life exhibit where we tried to compile 500 years of struggles in Latin America, against colonization, in defense of the territory, and so on. And then we cannot be indifferent to the struggles of the present. So just to give one example, we've been very active in regards to the ongoing genocide in Palestine. Most of all, trying to compile artwork that many artists are putting out there, whether it's to protest or denounce the ongoing genocide, and having this content be available for social movements who want to use it for propaganda and to boost their own reach and trying to increase this kind of global consensus in support of the Palestinian cause.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you mentioned Hassan Kanafani, because actually, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, we had one of our guests who actually talked The Legacy of Hassan Kanafani. Was the show with Khalid Barakat, who's a Palestinian based in Canada. Isaac and Fernando were on the show that day. People can find it on the YouTube channel. So thank you very much for that comprehensive background, Ricardo. So as mentioned previously, the main objective of Venezuela analysis, the news outlet, independent news outlet that you're a member of, is to counter the propaganda of corporate media, mainstream media in the West. So I was wondering if you could tell us what, in your opinion, are the 3 or 4 main pillars of that propaganda, Western propaganda, and also how it is impacting the perception of the Bolivarian Revolution, both internally in Venezuela, but also abroad, okay, in the region and also in the West.
Yeah, I think one thing we have to understand is that Western media, and here, I mean, we can talk about corporate media, but this also extends to the BBC or any other state outlets in the West. When it comes to foreign policy, I mean, it also applies to domestic policy, but let's stay on foreign policy for a second. Their ultimate goal has always been to endorse foreign policy, in particular U.S. foreign policy. I mean, we don't have to go back so far and remember the disgraceful role that the media played in the lead up to the Iraq War. All this circus and falsehoods surrounding the weapons of mass destruction and so on, or even more recently the invasion of Libya and how we're still dealing with the consequences of that operation, in which the media had a very significant role and should not be absolved of responsibility. So when it comes to Venezuela, I'm going to cheat a little bit by framing it the other way around, saying what are the main pillars of the Bolivarian Revolution and how they are being distorted by the corporate media. So here, when we talk about Chavez is, and I don't think this is an overstatement, Chavez is a giant political historical figure in Latin America and worldwide, let's say, in the 21st century. And so being such a larger-than-life figure, there was a constant effort to demonize him. And one of the things that always drove me insane was this idea that Chavez. I mean, you grab a Chavez speech, you take 2 sentences out of context, and he will look like a strongman or what have you. But the level of political depth of this project is really astounding, and it's something that continues to surprise us. Even now, we'll find the speech that Chavez gave in 2007, and at the time, people focused on some current affairs, but there was something much deeper politically that maybe people weren't fast enough to grasp at the time. So the demonization and, let's say, the oversimplification of the Bolivarian process has always been a key aspect of corporate media propaganda. Another one, and this kind of relates to the ongoing process, has to do with democracy. I mean, we all know that when Washington talks about freedom and democracy, this is code for local surrogates that are aligned with U.S. interests. So in the case of Venezuela, where there are huge natural resources at play, no less, of course, a government that's countering the hegemony of Washington in its quote-unquote backyard, and this project is going to be demonized and misrepresented, and that's another factor here. And we can just stop for a moment and ask why it's called Bolivarian. Why rescue independence hero Simon Bolivar 200 years later? And I think this is one of the keys from Chavez's political understanding, is that there is a continuous line that starts before Bolivar. It starts with resistance to colonization, and then there's independence struggle, and even after independence, there's a nominal independence and a republic that's installed, but it just stays in the hands of, let's say, the colonial oligarchs that become the Republican oligarchs, and this struggle continues. There's a very brutal revolutionary insurrection in the mid to late 1800s, and then it finally, let's say, leads to the Bolivarian Revolution, which should be understood as a kind of build up on all these historical precedents, and that's again something that the media will either choose not to understand or just not mention at all, and put Chavez as some kind of populist that sprung out of nowhere and benefited from an oil bonanza to redistribute wealth amongst the population as opposed to just sending profits to the United States. So I think that's kind of the main, let's say, the global approach from the corporate media to Venezuela. And one final aspect, when we talk about why Venezuela, to quote the infamous President Barack Obama, he was the one who classified Venezuela as an unusual and extraordinary threat to U.S. national security and interests in 2015. This was the legal basis, legal quote unquote, to impose economic sanctions against the country. But not in the way that he meant. Venezuela is a threat to U.S. hegemony, not just because of these natural resources and using the natural resources for the benefit of the population. There's also the use of natural resources to boost regional integration, programs like Petrocaribe that supplied fuel and crude to the Caribbean islands at very preferential rates to kind of break with their dependence from the US and US corporations. And then the final aspect, perhaps the most important one, is popular power, the creation of an alternative political model that explicitly says that socialism is the horizon, and it's not just rhetoric, it's something that's, it has advances and it has setbacks, but it's something that's being built from the ground up. And that, of course, is an incredible threat to US hegemony.
Thank you. Just before passing the, letting Isaac ask his question, because I have a couple of questions, just wanted to mention something that is very important. I don't know if our viewers have that in mind, but since you mentioned Simon Bolivar, I just wanted to remind our audience that he actually received a lot of support from Haitian revolutionaries. Okay, so he's the liberator of the Gran Colombia, which includes Venezuela, Colombia, and Panama, if I'm not mistaken. And the blue stripe on the flag of those countries, also the same blue that you find on the Haitian flag. So Haiti has played a key role in the liberation of Venezuela, Colombia, and Panama. Sorry for that.
Let me just add a quick note on that. So it's Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, and Panama. Those are the countries that were liberated by Bolivar. But it's actually very interesting because when Bolivar and his allies began the independence movement, it had very much a kind of oligarchic sentiment, very reminiscent of U.S. independence. And then this first republic is defeated and almost driven to annihilation, and Bolivar is forced to flee to Haiti. And then he returns with Haitian support and with a very different conception of independence, an independence that should have a real meaning for the oppressed, the indigenous populations, the enslaved population, and that's what ultimately drives success in, defeating the Spanish Empire, and that's what's actually rescuable from Bolivar in terms of the present revolutionary project.
Thank you, Ricardo, for that. And I also will add a little something because I know about Simeon Bolivar. If you guys are aware, there was these quote-unquote Pan-American conferences that they were having, and Simeon was a key role in that. And if you look up Pan-American, I have actually an article that maybe we can break this down. But it is essentially an anti-indigenous, American pro-white hegemonic construct. They had conferences, multiple conferences. Their founding fathers are people like Simeon Bolivar and Abraham, from them to Abraham Lincoln. And so, it's a little wild, a deep-rooted historical analysis that could probably be done there. But I want to, thank you guys for highlighting that. The question that I have for you, Ricardo, is that the Bolivarian revolution has been under attack for over 20 years, basically since President Hugo Chavez came to power. But those attacks have intensified over the past 10 years under the presidency of Nicolas Maduro. We've seen many Western countries recognize the corrupt, self-appointed President Juan Guaido. I hope I said, I really don't care if I said his last name right, as the legitimate leader of Venezuela, but it seems that he is no longer useful nowadays. There are obviously the unilateral and illegal sanctions, which we will talk about in a minute, and more recently the controversy regarding the results of the election, with several countries in Latin America and the West suggesting that President Maduro, who won the election, should step down. Why is it so important for Western countries and their allies in the region to overthrow the Bolivarian government, what are their hidden interests at stake?
Yeah, I kind of hinted towards this, and if I had to say, I don't think these interests are actually hidden. Every 3 months or so, we have a press conference from the head of the Southern Command. I think her name is Laura Richardson. And she just openly says, this is a wonderfully rich continent with oil, gold, and rare minerals, and so on. And we need to defend democracy, and we know what democracy means in this context. So I think when it comes to Venezuela, here we're talking about the largest oil reserves in the planet. And this used to be the most important country in the hemisphere for the United States. This was the main source of oil. It was a very pliant government that was in place for at least 50 years before Chavez came to power. And so there's obviously a lot of interest in regaining preferential access to the soil. When Chavez came to power, one of the main priorities for him was actually imposing sovereignty over the oil industry, ensuring that all these profits were used for social programs and what they called repaying the social debt. So you had these masses that had been historically not just impoverished, but also forgotten and absent from any kind of political protagonism. So there was debt to be paid in terms of not only raising living standards, but also providing access to service. Just to give an example, Buna will have seen that in Caracas, there are these neighborhoods on the hillsides, we call them barrios. And this was fostered by migration to the cities from the countryside, whether it was fleeing wars or to follow the oil boom. And all the way to the 1990s, these hillsides that are filled with houses were still classified as green areas. So if they were green areas, it meant that they had no public services. So those were the kinds of things that the Bolivarian Revolution set out to attempt by putting the oil revenue to good use. And it's no wonder that the elites reacted, and there was this coup in 2002 that briefly ousted Chavez before there was a massive popular response that restored him to power. Then there was this oil sabotage in the end of 2002 where the bosses of the oil industry locked out the workers to try and bring the country to a halt and force the government to surrender. And the people stood firm again and regained control of the oil industry. And ultimately, there was a series of laws that, for example, imposed that the state oil company must always have a majority stake whenever there's a joint project, these kind of things. So it's no wonder that the US has its sights set on Venezuela. For example, Trump was, we shouldn't always take what Trump says very seriously, but he said in a speech that, when I left office, I'm paraphrasing, the Venezuelan government was on the verge of being toppled, and we would have accessed all that oil. And then, of course, came Biden, and the rest is history. But, even though it's not true, the government was never on the verge of falling. But it goes to show how open, how brazen these interests are. Then when we talk about internationalism and challenging U.S. hegemony in the continent through regional alliances, I mentioned Petrocaribe, which is very inspirational for me, providing a different kind of politics in the Caribbean, also honoring this historical debt to Haiti. When we talk about, for example, the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, there was a big dog and pony show from Western countries and NGOs, but in the end, the people who really stood up were Chavez and Fidel Castro from Cuba, who actually provided meaningful, immediate aid to the Haitian brothers and sisters. So it's not just about rhetoric, but also putting these policies to use. And there are other regional alliances like the ALBA, which are beyond just having joint statements and taking collective diplomatic positions, which is important, but also providing social programs. There was a massive literacy program in the continent, also programs that provided free eye surgery for cataracts, which was a serious problem in many countries. So Venezuela, now to a lesser extent because of sanctions and the reduced oil production, but it was a driving force behind some of those programs. And again, another reason why the US is so hell-bent on overthrowing the Bolivarian process. And I'll add a quick note. Just today, or yesterday, because it's going to air tomorrow, the Supreme Court here in Venezuela kind of brought closure to the recent elections. and kind of ratified Maduro's victory for another 6-year term that will take him to January 10, 2031. And again, we saw a peak in terms of imperialist rhetoric and aggression, this far-right opposition that never recognizes election results and tries to stoke street violence and so on. I mean, there were controversies in the electoral process, and I think over time we'll have time, but I think the main question here is not to lose sight of imperialism and international solidarity and how Venezuela is and will remain a target for US imperialism. And in terms of Juan Guaido, I must confess, I had a lot of fun when Juan Guaido was in his imaginary office. It was just this constant source of jokes. Imagine someone in an office somewhere in Eastern Caracas, this wealthy part, giving orders to the military that no one really cares, or giving orders to diplomats and so on. There was, if I had to summarize the Juan Guaido self-proclaimed quote-unquote interim presidency in one image, he was once giving a press conference in an improvised set, and behind him he had a wall with the presidential shield, and at some point this shield fell to the ground. I mean, there was wind from the back and this shield fell to the ground, and you see that the shield was made of cardboard. So this was the cardboard presidency that the United States recognized as legitimate. And it is a joke. We should see it as a joke, but it also had real consequences, not in terms of meaningfully taking power. I say that Guaido began in 2019, and by the time he was booted out by his own people in 2023, in January 2023, he was maybe 5 centimeters close to the presidential palace than where he started off. But in terms of Venezuela's assets abroad, the existence of a parallel government that would be recognized by the US has had terrible consequences in terms of these assets being seized, being plundered. The most blatant case is that of Citgo. Citgo is one of the largest refiners in the US. And because of a number of actions by Guaido and his associates, because since they were recognized, they were the ones who had to appear before US courts concerning some litigation efforts, debts and arbitration awards. We don't have to get into all of that right now. But let's say that the Juan Guaido combo is directly responsible for what it seems like the impending loss of Citgo, which is valued at, 13 billion, and played a crucial role for Venezuela's oil industry. So he will go down in history as someone who should have faced justice, but is now living a comfy retirement in Florida, but also someone who did a lot of damage to Venezuela.
Wow. I mean, thank you, Ricardo. I mean, there's so much to unpack from what you just said. And just, the slimy, grimy, everyday trickery of the U.S. and its European cohorts, how they always have to have their little nubs in every situation to destroy and form coups and try to tell you who your leadership is and all that type stuff. Dictate your reality. It's amazing. The question I have is a 2-part question. One, we talked about the question of the sanctions and the sanctions that have been imposed on Venezuela. How have those unilateral and illegal sanctions impacted the Venezuelan economy and its people, and how have they been adapting to the sanctions? Also, with that question, you mentioned the whole situation about Venezuelan Supreme Justice Tribunal ratifying Nicolas Maduro's victory in the July 28th presidential election. I wanted to know, with Venezuela being in the news for so long in regards to the election, and along with that, how would this whole thing, the sanctions, the election, the ratification, the whole nine, what do you see happening in the streets of Venezuela from this point? How is that going to impact the people? Because there's been protests all over the world. You know what I mean? And as you mentioned, the U.S.'s slimy friend is not far from me now. He's in Florida. I'm in Georgia. What's your thoughts on the future of Venezuela and how the people are going to deal with this?
Yeah, let me start by addressing the sanctions. So sanctions have been the most important factor in Venezuelan reality for at least the past 5 years. There's no aspect of Venezuelan life that's not affected. In 2018, the Washington, D.C.-based Center for Economic and Policy Research published a study that estimated that sanctions, actually not 5 years, since 2017. So for the first 12 months after Trump imposed sanctions on the oil industry, it led to an estimated 40,000 deaths. So we're talking about tens of thousands of people who die every year as a result of some Venezuelan officials call it economic terrorism, and I don't think we have any qualms with the terminology. And sanctions have affected all sectors of the Venezuelan economy. So, for example, something simple, Venezuela, let's say the health ministry wants to import medicines, and this is easy, you go to a supplier, you get the bank account, you wire the money, you coordinate the delivery, and that's it. But Venezuela is blocked from financial markets, so the banks will not work as intermediaries for the kinds of transactions. So you always have to do some kinds of triangulations with third parties, which of course leaves you more vulnerable to corruption, or in some cases, transactions being blocked. But the artillery fire has focused on the oil industry because this has always had an outsized importance in the Venezuelan economy, and so it was the way to use Nixon's expression concerning Chile, to make the economy scream. And it had a huge impact in terms of production, going down from nearly 2 million daily barrels before the first sanctions, so mid-2017, all the way down to some 350,000 in mid-2020. So imagine the steep fall that it represented in terms of Venezuelan revenues and keeping social programs running. And since then, there has been a modest recovery. Now it's around 800,000. It still hasn't managed to break this elusive 1 million barrel day because of all the impositions that sanctions impose. I've talked about these significant oil reserves, and in normal circumstances, this would be an incredibly advantageous opportunity for investment, even with the sovereign conditions that I was mentioning before are imposed by Venezuelan legislation. So even under those conditions, foreign corporations would be interested in investing in Venezuela, but of course they are barred by sanctions. And it also goes to the kind of extraterritorial nature. So for example, imagine, and this is real, Indian companies have interest in Venezuelan oil, and yet they have to ask for permission from the US Treasury Department to import Venezuelan crude, because if they don't, they will be targeted by secondary sanctions. They will have their assets frozen in the US and so on. And of course, they don't want to run this risk. And on the ground, the government, we can talk about the reaction from the government and from the people, or the organized people. The government has tried to strike a balance between maintaining these key social programs, continuing to build public housing and this program that delivers subsidized food and so on. And at the same time, implementing a kind of liberalized agenda to improve conditions for the private sector and see if that can stimulate investment. So it's a very delicate balance to act, and of course that has fostered debate, whether the conditions are totally warranted by the circumstances, or whether they're going a step too far in affording too much weight to the national and foreign bourgeoisie in the Venezuelan economy. But it's a very dynamic process, and of course we have to take into account the sanctions background when we discuss it. But at the same time, and this is something we have covered extensively at Venezuela Analysis, popular power organizations, and particularly communes, who suffered a lot with this economic crisis, have also managed to, let's say, reinvent themselves and find solutions to, address people's needs, whether that's linking up directly city to countryside to provide food at affordable costs, or running their own healthcare clinics, just, improving political organization to show that, only the people will save the people. This is something that Chavez was very fond of saying. And now when we come to the context of the present election, even before the election, there are always these anonymous officials quoted by the media, and they said something like the US is going to, quote unquote, calibrate sanctions depending on the outcome of the election. And I always find that, talking about calibration as if it's just a button that you're nudging forward or backwards is a very callous way to talk about killing more or less Venezuelan civilians. But that's, the kind of discourse that has permeated the corporate media in terms of dehumanizing the Venezuelan population as a way to whitewash sanctions and thus endorse U.S. foreign policy. And so now, with Maduro winning and having his victory ratified by the Supreme Court, I think we can expect some protests from this far-right opposition. There's many flavors to the Venezuelan opposition, but the ones that are currently at the forefront are, let's say, the most fascist component. People with a long trajectory of supporting coups and not just endorsing sanctions, but even outright calling for foreign military intervention in the country. They come from these elites that thought the country was just a piggy bank for them to run at their own pleasure, and now find themselves displaced, not just by Chavez, who was not white, he came, and he was not from Caracas, he came from the countryside, and then he empowered this indigenous and African descendant majority, and that was all, like a big affront to these white colonial descendant elites, and that's why they have this constant hatred for the Bolivarian process. So I expect them to try some kind of street unrest in the coming weeks, but I don't think it's going to have any resemblance to previous iterations we saw, like in 2017 or 2014. I don't think they currently have the strength, and I don't think they currently have enough acceptance in the population, even within their own basis of support, to kind of sustain a long-term process of struggles on the street against the government. I don't think there's an appetite for that. The question is, what's the US going to do? Because all things being equal, I think the US would simply levy more sanctions right now as a way to see if they can press the issue and force. It hasn't worked until now. It wouldn't work now, but maybe in their conception, it would kind of force the government to submit and step aside. But I think there are other factors at play. One of them is that with all the instability, and that's putting it very mildly and very euphemistically, in the Middle East, they don't want to really upset the energy markets, and so it's not that Venezuela is a big supply right now, but how the markets work with speculation. So they might want to kind of tame that for now. And on the other, there's also the issue of Venezuelan migration, which has been spurred on by these sanctions and difficult economic conditions. There's a lot of them heading towards the US, and the Democrats, it's not like they are pro-immigration or anything, but they fear this issue being manipulated by Republicans and giving them an advantage in the run-up to November. And so they might not want to upset the situation in Venezuela too much against their own instincts. After November, then it's a big question what happens. Even if Trump comes to power, does he actually go back to what he called maximum pressure? It's not that I joke that the Biden administration moved from maximum pressure to 95% pressure, but does Trump actually want to ramp it up even more? Does he rerun the government now, recognizing this defeated presidential candidate, and set up another government in exile or what have you? Or does Trump take a pragmatic approach and say, let's work with these people, even if we don't like them, to increase our oil supplies? Trump, as someone with no principles whatsoever, is harder to predict. The Democrats, if they do win the election in November, I would expect them, I think they're more likely to ramp up sanctions within this misguided, again, to say the least, exceptionalism discourse.
That's very interesting. I'm glad that you pointed that out in regards to the Democrats, because some of the foolish folks around, they kind of look at it like, like, oh yeah, it'll be all right. It kind of leads us to this next question, because I think that sometimes we are unpleasantly surprised, but not really surprised, because our people sometimes confuse political education or politics with complexion. They get caught up in thinking that because someone is black, Obama's cool because he has a black wife and she has a way with words. You know what I mean? She has black children, so on and so forth. A nice dog, and they like rap music. You know what I'm saying? Cool. And then you have Kamala, who comes along, and folks don't even see a track record because all she has to do is look the part and bring in Megan Thee Stallion and whoever else is willing to do the dance. And all of a sudden, black folks are losing their mind over her, not understanding her policy, not just foreign but domestic, right? One of the questions we wanted to ask is the reactions of our so-called friends on the left, particularly here in the West. What is really striking is that many leaders and organizations on the left seem to have sided with the imperialists, as far as the narratives on Venezuela are concerned. Do you feel it's ironic that so-called left-wing organizations, including those who consider themselves revolutionaries, are in cahoots with the imperialists and even the far right in Venezuela?
Yeah, I think it's tragic in more ways than one. Not just in the West. We've recently seen, most of all, Brazilian and Colombian presidents, Lula da Silva and Gustavo Petro, kind of appoint themselves as some sort of mediators. And it's not new. I mean, I think this is kind of an illusion. I wouldn't call Lula and Petro revolutionaries. Even they wouldn't call themselves revolutionaries. They are from these, let's say, progressive currents who hold on to this very dangerous illusion that you can actually produce radical transformations that empower the majorities in your country while not antagonizing the United States. And that may be possible for some time, but I mean, this is a fundamental contradiction. It's not something you're just going to be able to skirt around. And so when it comes to Venezuela, both Lula and Petro have tried to be go-betweens between the Maduro government and the United States government. In a way, they were very important when they came to power because they helped Venezuela break out from this diplomatic isolation that had been imposed when there was this Guaido circus going on and there were lots of right-wing governments. And so they had managed to ostracize Venezuela from regional politics. And Lula and Petro, credit where credit is due, they managed to normalize Venezuela's participation in the international arena, as it should. I mean, this was the elected government. There was no reason for it to be replaced by some random idiot who proclaimed himself president. That being said, whenever the crisis rises up in temperature, they, instead of defaulting to principle and seeing the US as the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, they try to have this kind of mediation, also clinging on to what I believe is a very narrow definition of democracy, democracy that only happens through the vote and then disappears for the next 5 years. I think it's also a case of very short memory from Lula in particular. I'm going to single him out here, not to underestimate his role and his importance in Brazilian politics, but he should remember that when Bolsonaro, far-right Bolsonaro, came to power in Brazil, there was a lot of political persecution. There was even the judicial weaponization of justice against Lula and other people. So I think it's very disingenuous for him to say that, we just lose the election and then we prepare for the next. I think he should do better than that. But Lula also has a very checkered track record when it comes to foreign policy, particularly with this idea of staying within the US's good graces. I think when it comes to Haiti, circling back to Haiti, Brazil has played a very disgraceful role going back to 15 years ago when they were some of the main backers of this disastrous United Nations occupation force that had terrible consequences. And it's no secret that the Brazilian government, when Lula was in power, the first iteration, they did this kind of a quid pro quo in exchange for getting a seat at the UN Security Council. So I think we also have to hold these leaders accountable. And when it comes to organizations on the left, I think there are two flavors. I think one may be just a complete misguidance, and perhaps this is what Lenin called the infantile disease of communism, this kind of ultra leftism that does not see the big picture and just focuses too much on Maduro, and in this case even more so on the minutiae surrounding this election, and kind of gets lost from the big picture U.S. imperialism and also the rise of fascism in its different facets around the world and in Latin America in particular. And then there are the opportunists who feel that by attacking Venezuela, they are going to gain some credit and not be as targeted by the media or by their opponents. I mean, one clear example is Chilean President Gabriel Boric, who is a very vanilla-flavored leftist, and he feels that if he attacks Venezuela, then he's not going to be attacked by his own media establishment. But they still call him a dangerous communist, even though he has nothing to do with that. So I think it's a mixture of let's say being misguided and being opportunistic, and it's actually disappointing. And at the time, I mean, it's always important, but maybe now more than before, to establish principles of what does anti-imperialism truly mean, what does international solidarity truly mean, in terms of standing with the people, the oppressed, who are opposing this, let's say, most deadly and decadent empire of our times.
Yeah, I like the whole vanilla vanilla flavored leftist.
You can use it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm going to let Buna get down, but I got this question that's burning me. If you don't mind me asking Buna, many of our comrades, of course, we think Chavez was great. Chavez, as you mentioned, was a giant, but some of the comrades feel that Chavez was a little too nice, and he was a little kind where he shouldn't have been kind. Do you think that his lack of the hammer, dropping the hammer on him, do you think that's caused issues currently and from his particular since his leadership?
Yeah, I mean, of course, in hindsight is 2020, right? But I do think that's the case. Let me go back to this coup in 2002, where you had these oligarchic elites and the heads of the military at the time. Then they were all replaced. They triggered the coup and ousted Chavez for a little under 48 hours. And among the people who were driving this coup was Maria Corina Machado, who is now the most important figure in the opposition. So when Chavez came back to power on the wave of this incredible popular response, he thought his calculation at the time was to offer conciliation, and there were some mild political bans for some of these leaders, but then in the end they were allowed to continue. Chavez had a very he had a discourse that was, he emphasized convincing over imposing. And so his understanding, and he was correct in the sense that the Bolivarian project, Chavismo, the revolution, would empower and bring better conditions for the majority. And so this would lead to a process of gradually building popular consciousness. And in that sense, he wouldn't necessarily need to deal harshly with opponents, which would then kind of fuel these narratives, mostly from the outside, that he was a tyrant, that he was a despot, that he was undemocratic, and so on. I think in the end, there was some kind of miscalculation in that regard. I think it kind of allowed impunity to fester. And even now, 20 years later, it was impossible to know at the time. We are kind of seeing the consequences. So yeah, I think it's fair to look at Chavez from critical aspects in some regard. We can also talk about how the oil industry remained so important for the Venezuelan economy, and why there wasn't a greater effort to kind of diversify and have it less vulnerable to sanctions that eventually came later. It was impossible to know at the time, but this was set as a priority. And then, of course, you say, Chavez was first and foremost dealing with this so-called social debt. He was also promoting popular power. So there were different priorities at the time. But I think even considering Chavez as a giant figure, as you were saying, shouldn't stop us as revolutionaries from being honest and having thorough discussions on what was achieved and what could have been made differently.
We appreciate you, Ricardo, man. Definitely you know, we talked about Venezuela a few days ago, but of course we didn't do it justice like you just did. And it's always great to have correspondence from who are freedom fighters, for one, and have a clear analysis of what's going on and not just going off what the lamestream media has to say. So we invite you back on. Hopefully, you know, we can have you on regularly. Of course, Boona is going to share the website for folks to check out. And
Yeah.
like, definitely appreciate you.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, it was a pleasure, and definitely look forward to coming back whenever you want me.
Yes,
Yeah, thank you very much, Ricardo, once again for that very deep analysis. We hope to have you back. We haven't had the chance to talk about the leaders of the opposition. You mentioned them very briefly, especially Maria Corina Machado. But yeah, just wanting to encourage people to visit the website of Venezuela Analysis that you can see on the screen. So these are the latest articles that were penned by Ricardo on the website on the different issues that we have covered throughout this interview. There was also a very interesting article on Maria Corina Machado titled Maria Corina Machado, What the Mainstream Media Isn't Saying About Her. Okay, so this was written even before the election by Steve Elner. It's on the website of Venezuela Analysis. So once again, we encourage people to visit Venezuela Analysis to support the work that is being done by Ricardo and his comrades. They can also donate, by the way, as you can see on the screen. So yeah, we're looking forward to having you back. Thank you very much again for that very deep analysis. And adelante con la revolución, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure, and I also salute you for the great work that you're doing, and also bringing honest debate and discussion on these issues around the world. And I look forward to coming back and discussing the advances of the Bolivarian Revolution here in Venezuela.
Absolutely. Stay strong, brother. We will see you soon.
So this is the article I was talking about, Maria Corina Machado, what the mainstream media isn't saying about her. I think it's very important for people to read. And it's written by one of Ricardo's colleagues. So please do not hesitate to visit, donate to Venezuela Analysis, like, share, subscribe, just like you do for Black Poet Media, right?
No doubt. Well, stay safe out there, brother. We will see you soon. I don't know. I think we need to have them on at least once a month. What you think, Boona?
Yeah. So, well, don't know if it will be available because Ricardo is very busy, as you know.
Here he told us he's gonna make himself available. We don't care about that. It's Black Power Media. This ain't Beg Power Media, man. Come on, work with me.
No, when Chairman
Ricardo, he
says
doesn't know.
something, nobody can say no, right?
Commandante. Anyway. Be safe, Ricardo. We appreciate you, comrade. Stay on point. We'll see you soon.
Check it out.
No doubt. You're checking out the Rise Up Morning Show, International Morning Show. That was Ricardo Vaz, live from Caracas, Venezuela, giving us what we need on Venezuela because of the fact that, of course, you can listen to the New York Times and all these other fools, and they will have you running around like a chicken with his head cut off. But we're going to go to a quick Black Power break. You all right over there, Boona?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that we should take it to a sister an elder who I've had on RSTV in the past. She is a freedom fighter. When you talk about, right now we're commemorating the revolution, the Haiti revolution. So this is an individual who's written a serious book that I think that everyone should have. It's called She Rose of the Haitian Revolution. Stay tuned. Black Power Media, Rise Up Morning Show.
We don't like you because the only information we have about you is what your enemy and ours tell us about you. And you don't like Haitians either. Because you have the same information from the same source. about us. When was the last time the New York Times told you anything about Toussaint Louverture? When did the New York Times talk about Jean-Jacques Dessalines? When did you ever hear about what is the mission of this country? They even have us clap to be occupied in 1994. Yes, I stood up against the coup in Haiti. Yes, I stood up for the return of the will of the people in Haiti. Because at the time, yes, Aristide won by 70% of the votes. He is the choice of the people, so he should go back. But when I'm told, okay, he's going back with military occupation, I said, no, that's too expensive. This price, not for me. Most of my comrades were against me. But that's not their fault. Lack of vision, lack of knowledge of our street, lack of understanding. What does military occupation mean in any country? I don't care where. That is not the problem. Military occupation means prostitution will rise up out of the street into the best families, number one. Because General so-and-so and Colonel so-and-so from the U.S. Army is not going to go in the street and pay $2. No, and he's got to have a prostitute. He's going to go in your home, my home, take my sister. Number two, the cost of living must rise at least 15%. That's a fact, whether you want it or not. Any place where there have been occupation, those are the two first results of any occupation. Yes, ma'am. So before, 5 gourds for $1. Today, 17, 18, 19, 20 gourds for $1. You know how many people cannot eat in this country? 70% of the population is not working. The World Bank says, oh, to make things better, we have a good plan for you. Things are going to get real good, real fast. First, the public workers must be reduced by half. A study proved that every working Haitian feeds at least 7 people. And we only 30% of the population, the working population, is working. Now when you're going to reduce it to 15% of the population, how many people are we each going to feed? And then what happens to the ones who don't have somebody working to feed them? In 1946, Haiti imported nothing of what it needed to survive on a day-to-day basis. In 1960, Haiti did not import its food. Since 1970, there is progress, I think they call it. We start importing things. And today, 1997, Haiti imports even lemon, even plantain, even corn. And don't forget, we are buying it with 20 goods for $1. But remember, Haiti is nothing but an example. It's nothing. Whatever we say about Haiti, we could say it about Zaire, we could say it about Nigeria, we could say it about Togo, we could say it about Ghana, we could say it about Guinea, we could say it all over wherever our people are. And that's why we must make it our business. If we say we're serious about growing, if we say we're serious about going to war, you have to know what's happening in every part of your world. Don't sit here. I'm a black American. I'm living in Newark, New Jersey. Well, New York, I have no problem in Newark, New Jersey. We're okay. We have a nice mayor. No, we've got to become involved. Because whatever they're doing to us in Haiti, whatever they did in Zaire, in Lomé, in Ghana, it's coming to you, brother. It's coming your way, if it's not already there.
Sad, and it's the Rise Up Morning Show. Boona was looking nervous. He thought he was all alone. He's like, where Kalonji go? You know what I mean? Oh man, that was Baina Bello. For folks that don't know, Baina Bello is, man, she's been putting in work for quite a while. I would say she's one of the foremost authorities on Haitian history. Her, along with our sister Esley Danto. I believe Esley Danto might be coming to Black Power Media soon with a show. With a show. What y'all know about that? We got some shows coming, man. Yo, Boona, man. You think they ready for Black Power Media? What's happening, man? You know what I mean? You know, Boona try to be diplomatic because he like, hopefully Kalonji don't say nothing crazy, get me banned. I can't come back to the US. You know what I mean? They be like, yo, you roll with that Kalonji guy? He'd be like, nah, I ain't never heard of him. But anyway, no doubt, man, Baina Bello is definitely someone that folks need to get up on if you're not familiar with her. I did an interview with her maybe about 2 years ago on RSTV. And I think that you should dig in the archives for that one. It was probably one of my favorite pieces. And we'll probably get her back on here soon. Perhaps we'll bring her on the morning show or something. You know,
hope so.
If folks are interested in that. So that was a pretty heavy interview on Venezuela. Good job on that. I understand we have another interview coming up very shortly. It's crazy. We saw the brother in the background all this time. And all of a sudden he disappeared. You know what I mean? We're going to say that about that. You know what I mean? But how you feeling today, man? You all right?
Yeah. Just wanted to make a quick comment on Baina Bello's, statement on Haiti. I think she raised some very powerful, important points that even people in the so-called conscious or organized movement we tend to forget, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the fact that we're feeling good at home doesn't necessarily mean that the situation of the entire African family, whether they're in the diaspora or Africa, is the same, right? Mm-hmm. I always say that Haiti should be the compass of African liberation. So whenever you want to know about the global situation of Africans, look at the situation of Haiti. And this will give you a very good overview of the overall situation of our community. Because one of the issues with micronationalism is that it tends to separate us from the rest of the African family. And without the Haitian Revolution, you and I would probably not be in this room talking as free people, right? Because the Haitian Revolution that provoked the crisis of the entire slave system, which, as Dr. Gerald Hunt has shown in many of his books, could not be resolved with the continuation of slavery. So slavery had to collapse because the African people in Haiti decided that it had to stop, right? So they led a very important, and I don't even say bloody revolution, because I think it was when the chairman was on, or even before that, you made a remark suggesting that one of the, and I'll make a very small critique, if you allow me, Chairman Kalonji, that when you say that one of the reasons why we find ourselves in the situation that we are in is because we were not able to reciprocate the type of violence that we received. But if you study the Haitian Revolution, it was very bloody. Okay, it spilled a lot of blood. So they really showed the way to African people, and the Haitian Revolution, which, as we pointed out in the first hour, has been an inspiration to the revolutionaries liberators in South America, but also throughout the diaspora, whether in the in the Caribbean, South America, and even in Africa, right? So
Right.
hatred should always be on our mind. And what I really liked about her is the fact that she actually wrote a book, as you mentioned, about the woman who played the revolution, because we tend to focus on Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Bookman, these great heroes of African revolution, but the narratives sometimes tend to
lost.
Yeah, we lose track of the importance of the our mothers and grandmothers who are involved in the struggle, not only in Haiti but in African liberation in general.
Right. Now I want to point out something. I accept your criticism, bro. Yeah, no, I absolutely
you expect that one, right?
Huh? No, I'm like I agree. Indeed, we have I wasn't making a blanket statement. I'm talking about the overall, right? I'm saying so it's just like movement, it's like revolution. You and I might fight, but everyone's not gonna get down with the fight. You know what I'm saying? Some folks would be looking for um Kamala to save us, and others would be mad because Cornell's even running. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not me saying that we're not doing anything, because clearly, I'm surrounded by fighters as far as veteran freedom fighters, so on and so forth. And that's the purpose of this platform right here. So, but I'm glad that you pointed out, because sometimes people might think that I'm saying that, we've just been taking blows. We've had victories under the belt, not just in Haiti, but, even in places like the Virgin Islands. When you had, when you talk about like, Queen Mary and the fire burn, you know what I'm saying, over in St. Croix, and the revolts that took place in St. John, you know what I mean, and St. Thomas, so on and so forth. So I've been to different places and I've studied revolution and freedom fighters all over the place, from Jamaica, so on and so forth. We don't get that information often because it's hidden. Throughout the diaspora, we've been, fighting. Fighters in Quilombo, fighters in Virginia with folks like Gabriel Prosser, the Nat Turners, just so many brothers and sisters, the Black Liberation Army, you know what I mean? Revolutionary Action Movement, Diggers of Defense, so on and so forth. So definitely I'm not saying that we're not fighting back, but I'm saying as a whole, a number has been done on us so well that even I say that proof of our psychological abuse and damn near defeat is the fact that here it is, you and I both speaking English. You understand what I'm saying? You're in France, in another colony. You know what I mean? Of course you speak French. We know that these dominant languages are the dominant oppressors. You know what I'm saying? Wherever you are, those are the ruling class. The fact that we even speak English is bizarre. I can only imagine if our ancestors were to look down the barrel of time and they saw us speaking these languages, how we must look. You understand what I'm saying? And we talk about cultural appropriation. I hear folks all the time tell me, yeah, man, these white folks trying to be like us, they taking hip hop, and we joked about the white girl doing the break dance and all that type of stuff. Yeah, that happens. However, at the same time, we walk around dressing, walking, talking, and acting like Europeans. You know what I mean? So the thing is, we have to figure out what are ways for us to build a united front against fascism, but a united front that is ran by Africans who are considered left. You know what I'm saying? Not those who are not the Jesse Jacksons and the Al Sharptons and the Black Parties and the Jeffries and all that folks.
think there's an issue with your mic, Kalanji.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay. Yeah. So in a nutshell, just us being clear about what must be done, because I think that's one of the main things that we're uncertain about. We don't even want to think about what must be done, let alone do anything. But I think, excuse me, I think our guest is ready. We have a
Yeah.
guest, another guest who's supposed to have a show on this platform. We're gonna talk bad about him as well. I've been talking to him for a while, and at one point he was calling me every day. Then all of a sudden I said, "Hey, let's do the show." I ain't hear from him no more.
Yeah.
But anyway, introduce our audience to our next guest, if you don't mind. This
Yeah.
brother's
So
insane.
yeah, it's a very good brother of yours. You've known each other for even before you met, actually.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, for decades now. So our next guest is Abuy Fubeya. So Abuy is a journalist. He's a political analyst and longtime political activist in Pan-African struggle. He's from Equatorial Guinea and he's based in Spain. Abuy is one of the co-founders and leaders of the Pan-African organization, Fourth International Garveyite, Cuarta Internacional Cimarron in Spanish. He has also co-founded and also one of the leaders of the Malcolm Garvey University, the online Tribune African Reparation, Reparación Africana, as well as the YouTube channel Uhuru Africa TV. He was also one of the founders of the Black Panther Party in Spain, Partido Las Panteras Negras in Spain. He's also the author of several books, which are all published in Spanish, including Malcolm X and the Hip Hop Generation, published in 2013. And more recently, I guess it was in 2019, Afrofeminism, 50 Years of Struggle and Activism of Black Women in Spain. And as we speak, our guest is finalizing a book that he's been writing for several years, which is a political biography of Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela. Okay, Winnie Mandela. So, Abuy, thank you very much for joining us on Black Power Media.
Nice to meet you.
To the Rise Up Morning Show.
Nice to meet you. I'm very happy to be in this show with great African freedom journalists like Kolanji and Buna, one of the biggest Tupac Shakur in Paris, France.
So yeah, so today we wanted to talk about the recent developments in the Sahel region, especially Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, which have now formed the Alliance of Sahelian States. Maybe if you have time, we can talk about at the end of the show, the Congress that your organization will be participating in Spain to support the Alliance of Sahelian States and to commemorate the first anniversary of their confederation. But we've seen recently that the governments of Mali and Niger have decided to cut diplomatic relations with the government of Ukraine. And this happened as top officials in the Ukrainian government, Ukrainian army, have taken credit for killing hundreds of soldiers of the Malian army in Mali, northern Mali, and also some of the Russian soldiers who were fighting with them. So they took credit for that attack. And also the ambassador of Ukraine in Senegal was summoned for posting a video on social media, actually rejoicing, that the terrorist attack, which was responsible for the death of the Malian soldiers and Russian in northern Mali. So I was wondering if you could give us more background on why the governments of Mali and Niger have decided to cut diplomatic relations with Ukraine, and also the importance of the Sahel in this new context of which people have called the new Cold War. So the strategic importance of the Sahel in the new Cold War.
Well, first of all, I agree with you because Cold War never finished. Only when this Japanese professor Fukuyama, he said the end of a history. But maybe he didn't listen Public Enemy when Public Enemy said the freedom is the law between this multitude. So he didn't understand that. So when they did talk in the 80s, in the 90s, when the West win Soviet Unions, and they said the history be finished, they don't know about the Africa is still continues because Africa was in the Cold War and this Cold War continues. And what's happened now is that European Union, French, basically the French imperialists and European Union, they translate the conflict to Africa, but this conflict was always in Africa, in Angola, Russia, Cuba, Angola, and South Africa against apartheid, Equatorial Guinea with Macias and Gema, in a place like Marianguabe in Brazzaville. So always the Cold War was continuous in Sahara, and the people was only focusing on the problem of Palestine. They forget Africa. The Africa continued to struggle because it's in the Middle East when the West have an interest. So, but I still have interest in Africa because there was in 90s there was the war in Congo, the wars in Burundi, Rwanda. Millions of people died in this war, Liberia, but there was war making by the West. The West was organized this war against the Soviet Union. So why these three government in the alliance of Sahel, they decided broke the relationship with Ukraine, because Ukraine is the tool, is the instrument of West. First of all, in the war against Russia and China, and then now in Africa to promote jihadism, to promote terrorism. You know that they broke this jihadism to defeat Gaddafi. Until Gaddafi died, the terrorism was in Africa only 10%. So after in order to defeat Gaddafi, they bring more than 55% terrorism. Bring them from the Bangladesh, Pakistan, play like this. They bring them there to destroy and defeat Gaddafi. And then all these weapons that was taken by those terrorist army who was in function working with the West. First of all, French and Europe, the rest of the European Union. And you remember the day with the president of Niger, Mohamed Bazoum, was defeated by the Revolutionary Army. Spanish Minister of the Foreign Affairs ran away to see him. And people say, what's this man? What's going on? Because they have an interest. Because Mohamed Bazoum, he said that he's Muslim, he's very Muslim, but where Mohamed Bazoum put his money? In the Vatican Bank. You see, he said, I'm Muslim, but finally his money, was this, that we come back to the Mao Zedong and the Marxism, the materialismo histórico, materialismo dialéctico, materialismo histórico, historical materialism. So they put his money in the Vatican Bank. But he said that he's the most Muslim in Niger. So you see, so this is Mohamed Bazoum. And then the people of Africa always, we see these people like puppets of West, but we don't have any capacity to kick out them from where they are. So Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso did that. At the same time, when ECOWAS said that they will attack Niger, since today didn't do anything. So the people see that it's possible. So when Hugh P. Newton in his biography, he talked about that. He said in Spanish, miedo y duda. Hugh Newton writing this pamphlet. It's called Miedo y Duda. The scare and
fear is useful.
Yes. Yeah, when he wrote about that. So ECOWAS was merely do that. you know. And
So just for our audience, ECOWAS is the Economic Community of West African States.
okay.
It's about 20 states. For those of our among our viewers who might be wondering what ECOWAS is, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, ECOWAS is the puppet of the war between West, NATO, Ukraine against China and Russia. You know, so ECOWAS in Africa make this role. You know, to attack everybody who disobey the slave master. You know, anyone who say no to slave master was going attacking, imposing this, making this, attack them because this is the Western, the house Negro countries, Senegal, Costa de Marfil, Nigeria, and Ghana. You know, they work for a slave master, they work for a plantation. And you have another nation that said no. Let's escape. Let's separate. Let's run away, as Malcolm X said. Any place is better than this. you know, as Malcolm said, that any place better than this. Any place better to be in French hand. You know, people tired up French colonialism. So let's run away. So what will happen now? What we see now happen with Ukraine and Senegal is the consequence which happened last summer in Gabon. And the same thing they made 30 years ago with Mandela. You remember when Mandela went out from jail? They beginning to make plot to separate from Winnie. Quick, quick. So Mandela implemented neoliberal policies. That is true. You know, I love Mandela, but I know that he was making neoliberal policies that it keep white people his money, European powerful money, and make Africans the powers in the earth. That is the situation because when those happened, South Africa was in the time to get a revolution. You know? So that's what Malcolm X said, that if you know what the revolution back in the way. You understand? So South Africa was in time that the people were going to make revolution. There was not only ANC, it was the PAC, it was the Black Movement Conscience of Steve Biko. There was many women in the street, many groups in the street fighting. So that is happening now in the Sahel. It's not just the military. The military is just the cover. But behind, you remember, I know, Buna, you remember 6 years ago when we started to make demonstration in Mali when Kemis Seba came to Spain, you know, when Kemis Seba left the jail. And, you know, now everybody is on internet. But when in 2010, you know, when we was making this demonstration in Africa, in Mali, in Burkina, in Niger, in Guinea, in many places, there was brothers and sisters trying to do things. And what's happened now? Ukraine, French know that ECOWAS cannot attack this field Negro. So they use Ukraine because Ukraine is making this job, you know, with the plot with the last Senegalese president, Macky Sall. Now Macky Sall is working for what? We work for Macron. He's the assistant of Macron. Openly. It's not me. It's openly. You go to internet, you find Macky Sall, you will see that he's working with Macron.
Yeah, so again, Macky Sall is the former president of Senegal, and Macron, probably most people know, is the president of France, right?
So African people around the world, they're waking up against imperialism and colonialism. Those happen in New Caledonia is the sample. You understand? And French and African people, the conscience of African people is growing up. Young people, women, students, they're growing up. There's not true that nothing going on. The revolution is going on. You know, the public enemy said that revolution will be televised, but it's not true. The revolution is televised. We see them. We see, you see people like Assimi Goïta, you know, Ibrahim Traoré, you know, young people. I think Ibrahim Traore born in 1988. He's a very young man, but he understands history. He understands that Africans need voice, and Europeans want to use Ukrainians to stop Africans. For example, right here in Spain, the Ukrainian refugees receive money, house, car, security, job, and African refugees they receive kill them. You understand? They beat them, they kill them, they murder them. They receive total different response of European Union.
Just we've talked about it, but just to give an example, I think was it in August 2022 when they killed? No, it was last year, August 2023, when they killed over 100 Africans at the border between Spain and Morocco.
In Melilla.
In Melilla.
Yes.
We're trying to cross the border.
This event was very political to understand geopolitics because he was in the summit of the NATO in Spain, in Madrid, in front of all leaders of NATO. The president of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, decided to tell them, I'm the boss of this plantation. I want to show you that I can kill every nigger here. So you're going to give me, you and respect me. You understand? So he killed more than 75, and those was the demonstration that we have a crisis of the government because what the African embassy, no one protests. Every time police kill someone in London, in France, in Madrid, in Lisbon, no African diplomatic protest. That means that we don't have any sovereignty. So these young people like Simi Goita, they understand that because they saw on the internet how black people suffer in Europe. So this new government, military government, the response against this situation that always Europe killed. That's why when Malcolm X went to the European United Nations, they announced the situation of the African in the US and the situation of an African in South Africa, because he want to internationalize the problem of the black people in the US, and people didn't understand that because it's something that this happened now. Now the state of Sahel, they make the federation, they continues this old federation that Marcus Garvey said, the one Africa, one nation. He didn't say one Africa, 3,000 nations, Sudan del Sur, what do you call Eritrea, and then, they broke Africa in many small states, what that to control. So Marcus Garvey said the one Africa, one nation. He was clear. He was clear. He know that the United Nations and Paris, it was dividing Africa after the so-called First World War. So the situation is now they want to divide Africa after the Clinton. When Clinton betrayed Savimbi to make business with what do you call the Angolan president.
I will give us a lot of names, but don't forget to give some background to those people are. So Savimbi was the leader of UNITA, CIA apartheid-backed armed group in Angola.
And Savimbi was the leader of the UNITA. It was the first of all, he was with Chinese when Lin Piao, Mao Zedong, and when the time when he traveled to the revolutionary culture in China. So Savimbi was with Chinese, because you remember the Chinese was fighting with the Soviet Union to get their own food in Africa. Everybody want to eat, but the Chinese want their own food, you know. So the Chinese, they were supporting, and then he moved his support with the it was supported by the United States, Savimbi. So Clinton betrayed Savimbi, and he became friends of Dos Santos, because Dos Santos tell him, I can give you the oil for $2. You know,
Dos Santos was president of Angola at that time.
Angola. And then Clinton betrayed John Garang in Sudan, because John Garang was they make the government, they call united government between Arabs and black, and then he was minister of this government. The Arabs killed him, and United States became friend of this Arab, but he was supporting John Garang for a long time, telling people that the John Garang is Christian. You know, and then he betrayed John Garang, and then it was the same thing happened. Savimbi, John Garang, and even the Senegalese independent movement in the south of Senegal, who they call the capital is the Jirinsok. He was a pastor there. They were supporting by the West to make a revolutionary movement to divide Senegal, and you know, all these people, they was feeling, because West, they don't need them. The same thing happened with Mugabe. When they made the independence agreement, England said that in order Zimbabwe don't become communist, they will pay reparation to the farmers and the people of Zimbabwe, right? Salisbury Agreement, I think is the name of this document. Okay, when your Soviet Union down, English people, your mayor say, we don't need to pay this nigger anything. You know, fuck with this nigger, you know. Because communists is not more. You know, people are afraid communists in Africa. So we give this nigger money because they should be communists. The same happened with Spain in Equatorial Guinea. When Spain gave Equatorial Guinea independence, you know, October the 12th, Columbus Day, 1968. You know, Spain kicked out all the money from bank, and then they made coup d'etat against President Matias Nguema. So Matias Nguema became communist. North Korea, Cuba, Vietnam, you know, all these people, you know, the bad boys, you know, and he became with these people. And then Spain, in order to keep that Guinea don't be a communist, they support Gabon, you know, to take their territory and make them fight, make them civil war. You know, all these things, Western do it in Africa. It was in the civil war. You understand? And what Mobutu is doing, it was the Cold War. Mobutu, we know Mobutu in the political way, but at the intellectual way, Mobutu was more higher intellectual than Senghor, because Mobutu wrote a book. He said, "Authenticité," the interpretation of the negritude. I got this book, but Mobutu was serving Western, all things Western want to do. And then when the Western see that Mobutu is not more necessary, they let them go. Even they don't let them come to Europe. they born in Morocco, in Africa. You know, all his money, all his things. He has a plane in Spain. The Spanish government take the plane and sell it. This is the reality of what's happened in 60s. And all this reality, and we arrived to Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara was killed by his friends. They call Blaise Compaoré. I need to explain this Compaoré, Buna, or no?
No, just giving some background. But we're going back to the Sahelian states now. So Thomas Sankara is the former president of Burkina Faso, which you have mentioned previously.
Blaise Compaoré. Blaise Compaoré was his Uncle Tom friends in Africa. You know, he was the man who organized the plot to kill any African revolutionary. He was a French sent them to kill him. You know,
Right.
so he was the role Blaise Compaoré played for Europe, and we must understand that always Europe will control and try to control Africa. So what's happened now in Ukraine? What's
Yeah.
happened now in Ukraine? What's happened now in the Sahel, in Senegal, is the even in Gabon, Undosa, Ngea, all these people is European. You must understand the neocolonial system is still. It's not. It's not just something that we're talking theoretically. It's the
Right.
reality. It's the fact.
So
So.
hey, so Abuy, I wanna take it back because we started off we started off talking about what was going on in the Sahel. You know,
Uh-huh.
we mentioned previously, of course, the three governments: Mali, Burkina Faso, um, and Niger, have decided to form the Alliance of Sahelian States in the context of an intense fight against terrorism and also threats of military intervention from neighboring countries. Last year, ECOWAS, as Buna mentioned, the Economic Community of Western African States, headed by Nigeria, threatened to intervene militarily in Niger. What is the significance of this alliance, not only for the people living in those countries, but also for the global Pan African movement? It's been in the news. A lot of Africans are excited around the world. A lot of Africans want to visit. They want to co-sign. They want to be a part of it, and they're looking at it as a possible chance for African liberation. Some folks have even gone as far to think or believe that this is the second coming of Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, and folks like Sekou Touré. I want to know, what does this mean to not only, as I mentioned, not only to the alliance, what's the significance of the alliance, but also not only people living in those countries, but worldwide. What does it mean to you in Spain? What does it mean to Buddha in France? Me in the U.S. It's like we literally had on this platform just in the last hour folks from Venezuela, from Spain, from France, and in the U.S. And we believe we're on the same page. But what does this alliance mean? Is it functional? Is it practical? Practical? What do you think?
Well, first of all, we must to understand that all this process going on now, we see in the Sahel, is not the military vanguard, it's the people. It's a consequence of the job we did in the past. People like Omali Esitela with his newspaper, Bani Spear, newspaper like Nation Time with Akinjele, other people. So we come doing jobs to fortalece the conscience of the young people. It's not nothing new. It's something that is coming in the process, because we must understand the revolutionary process, because there is process in all this. And the second one is that the question of resource, the oil, manganeso, the gold, the all these resource that coltan, that Europe and France and they still in Africa. They still impoverishing us. They still getting like place like Niger. France got 83%, and Niger get the rest. And the half of this rest going to the pocket to the Mohamed Bazoum or Biangema in Guinea, Equatorial Guinea, because Guinea exploit the petrol. You know, the for oil, Texaco, all this company, they give Guinea 25%. Obiang put the half of 25% in his pocket, and the rest try to make some small school. There is no school in Niger. You understand? Niger is one of the most poorest country in the world, but he made all these resource for Europe. So the narrative is the third things. The third question is the narrative. The narrative say that it's impossible to fight a slave master as to Toussaint Louverture do, fight the last master in Haiti and defend them. You know, the Niger and all these people doing that because ECOWAS, it tried to do the same thing that Spanish, England, and the DIT to attack them, to make them embargo, you know, all these things, and people resist. And people demonstrate that we are with this government. You don't gonna hang me. You know, you don't gonna lynch me like you want to do, because it's the police, you know, the police mentality. So we're gonna attack these, and the people of Nigeria, who is you know, the majority people in Niger and Nigeria, they are the same people. They are Hausa, and the Hausa people in Nigeria said that you don't gonna attack my people. They told the state. People went to the street in Nigeria. They tell the government, you don't gonna attack my people. We are in the same people in the other border. Because you are a state, you are a nation. There are two questions. So Africans, they're taking nations. And in Europe, they take a state. The government, the biggest, you know, the biggest dictatorship who work for Europe. One of other things, Kolanji asked question, is some question that sometimes I spoke with my brother Buna, and it's part of the book you say about Winnie Mandela. The question of democracy. What mean democracy for Black people? As this big man said, who's mean July the 4th for African people, for Black people? When the people talk democracy in Africa, democracy means that. Yeah, Frederick Douglass. Yeah, when Frederick Douglass said, what mean for July the 1st? Well, what mean democracy? So when Europe come with this narrative of democracy, they confuse everybody. Because the same people talk about democracy is the same people to steal the resource, is the same people who killed Thomas Sankara, is the same people who are support of Biangema. You know, it's the same, it's a very contradiction. You see, they bring Sahel. The people of Sahel said, fuck with you, democracy. We tired with this democracy, with this concept. We tired. You know, they bring you, you know, Abuy Africa need more school. We need a school, you need university. But as Molefia Sante said, there is not African university. There is European universities in Africa, who is different. You know, when they bring school, they bring European school in Africa. As Molefi told that, Molefia Sante told that a long time, that the African school is the European school in Africa. You understand? So those people in Sahel demonstrate that the question of democracy is some kind of abstract, because the government like Senegal, they vote in Senegal, they vote in Equatorial Guinea, they vote in Nigeria, they vote in Kenya and Ghana, but the social condition doesn't change. We still poverty, people still fighting for it, but we vote, you know, and normally we vote those who European Union design it. French, they say that you're going to be president, you're going to be, you know. So people now, they are concerned that they are able to change by themselves, and they need to the solidarity, international solidarity with the movement, you know. So what's concerned is that first of all, in the media, we made last summer. I remember last summer when the riots, oppressed. I'm sorry, I said riot. Oppressed. The bomber, let's say oppressed, happened in Paris, in French. You remember? Since that time, we make that the media talk about Africa and Sahel. That's never happened. In Europe, you have apartheid news on Africa. Right here in Spain, you can stay in Spain, you're live, you put the TV, you will never hear nothing on Africa. You know, it's like something and Africa is only less than 20 kilometers from Spain. But they make this question that nobody talk about Africa, Nobody know about what's the business going in Africa, and we broke this question. Now the people is talking about Niger, about Sahel. People didn't know who is the president of Niger or Burkina Faso or anyone. You know, understand? Now people know that. So we are fighting in the narrative to in this process of revolution. Media like this, Black Power media, is making contribution to do that, to change the mentality of not only white people, Black people himself. They understand that this is something, a process, as Umali Sitala said, white power in the black face. We still in this situation, but we advance because now we are talking about things that we never talk. Right. You know, before there was killing president in Africa, nobody talk. You know, and now we know that. At the same time, we have connection with the global African movement in the media. I told you, and this is very important. That's why we see this process of the Sahel, and because we have many contradictions with some kind of the black chick boom boom chaka chaka glam glam. They say no, this is military, Abuy, military. We told them then that you know, I told them Thomas Sankara was in military, Maria Ngwabe was in military, Samora Machel was in military. So Hugo Chavez was in military. We have many people. And this, you know, because this is what's the narrative that the Western media told people, you know, they're giving job. We must to make war in the media. It's the media war. It's like when the Negro War in the 20s with Marcus Garvey bring to fight was the Europeans talk about the colonialists that was the Black Power media are not the ones that's doing. It's the fight and the question of the narrative of the media and try to concern. Look, the French government, they are making document. They said that the most potential enemy of the French colonialist movement is a Pan-Africanist media. Ms. Macron said that. You see,
Macron said,
yes.
Well, listen.
Buna know about that. You know.
Yeah, I know. Buna voted for him. But listen, we're running out of time, Abuy. We definitely appreciate you coming on. Folks should check out Uhuru Africa TV on YouTube. Uhuru Africa TV. You see it on it next to his name. Also, hopefully he'll be on Black Power Media soon with his own platform. You know, he's been talking about that for like 8 years now, before Black Power Media even started. But we appreciate what you bring to the table. It's good to know that we have comrades all over the world, and that's why it's a beautiful thing for us all to rise up and to rise up on the Rise Up Morning Show and express Black Power as African people, not in some not just in some dream version, because sometimes folks talk about Black Power, but they talk about Black Power, but they moving under white power. So they get kind of confused as to what's going on. So we definitely want to thank you for coming on. We're about to close out in a second, and I think that one thing we should do, because you mentioned,
I want to invite people to come to this meeting. Will be Madrid from 1 to 3 of November. Is the meeting in solidarity with the state of Sahel, and Brode Ondo is the spokesperson of this meeting, and the people can join us in the media, and we are inviting all Africans to solidarity with this process. And because Bob Marley said that, how long will they kill our prophet? Oh, we'll start in Sahel. Look, and this will happen because this Sahel is attacking by French people, and we must to make them solidarity, because the same thing happened when they kill Huey Newton, when they kill all these people, Fred Hampton, and when they kill Thomas Sankara. And we must to come to Madrid to make this solidarity conference with this Sahel. We're going to take the Madrid Declaration, And then the last year we make in Barcelona. This year we made Madrid, and maybe the next one we make in Paris, because we must call this the diaspora African in Europe must to be active, not intellectual active, no, the feel Negro active, you know, and at this level, as George Jackson said, at this, at Tupac said this level to bring this force together and to talk about this question. And this is what Ukraine and Europe try to co-opt the leaders. I told you, Kolanji, now we have this situation in Europe. Maybe Buna tell you, the French government, the European government is co-opted African activists. You know?
That I don't think that's new. They've been corrupting Africans.
They do it from people from Equatorial Guinea to talk about pacifist, non-violent, you know, things like this, you know.
Well, check this out, brother Abuy Marley. We know you before you start singing your next Bob Marley rendition. We definitely you know, the piece that you're doing in November. We want to welcome. We want to invite you to broadcast it here on Black Power Media, because we think it's folks internationally that need to be involved, and many folks won't be able to get to Spain. So we want to give you that invitation, let you know that the door is open for that. Black Power Media is willing to broadcast it if you all would like, you know, for those parts that are that will be public. Unfortunately, we are out of time. This is Black Power Media. We'd like to thank our guests today. Who was some of our guests today, brother? We had Ricardo.
Yeah, we had Ricardo Vaz for the first hour, Venezuela analysis.
Yes,
and
sir.
We have your friend now. He needs no introduction from me.
Abuy Marley, he broke down a Bob Marley song. I didn't know he could sing. Abuy is an amazing guy, man. He got a restaurant going in the background.
I think he's time for dinner. People will call him for dinner.
Yeah. It was looking good in the back. I was going to say, man, like, you know, I'm getting hungry. We're going to see if we go to Abuy's for dinner after we leave here. But anyway, stay on
good.
point.
I'm very happy to be in this show, and with I know it's a job Kolanji is doing long time ago with Akinjele and other people. So Aminara, all these, you know, I'm very happy that we after 30 years ago, we're still in the same plantation, doing the same thing, hate the life master, and hate as the house Negro, and try to be free and try to be happy. Uhuru.
Thank you. We will see y'all mañana or next week.
Nos vemos mañana.
Yes. No doubt. Revolution, Black Power Media, we out.
Yes.
Sometimes the riot is a quiet one, or the battle is to love yourself and function in society where voices of reason are muted by anxiety, like gaining notoriety is selling your soul. So we tend to go no deeper than the shallow water level, trying to keep us overhead in the face of all the slurs and the stares, mentally frozen, paralyzed by fear of failure and success. So we lock, stock, barrel, running while it's crumbling. All these towers and they're babbling, but the baby's in the bath and the stash under the bed on my head, spinning from the circles and the puppets and the strings that they pull. Then we move. Reactionary warfare never produces when it's on the field. Feeble and foolish. What tools and what weapons are we using? We need some new ones. Real revolution. It's real solutions. Well, we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution. Well, my inner me really a mirror for the galaxy. New time, brand new paradigms, new contracts to sign. They thought that this would all be televised, though it's happening right before our very eyes. It's on the inside, with their guns cocked. When that rock drops, standing on the rooftop, praying that the mountaintop can live inside the valley. People tell me the reward is somewhere off in heaven. like heaven's only in the sky, like chariots are swinging, like God is something separate from yourself, from your wealth, from your lover, from your neighbor. Oh, your savior is coming in your own name, coming with the face